Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to beautiful downtown Grand Forks, the proud home of the University of North Dakota. This is the Grand Forks City Council Committee of the Whole. We'll begin with roll call, please.
Sure. Weigel.
Here.
Osowski. Here. Weber.
Here.
Lunsky.
Here.
Kwame. Sandy.
Here.
And Bean.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good. Updates and information items. Item 2.1, Project 8742, the 2024 flood update. Mr. Grasser, please.
Thank you. Had to make sure this thing is on. At the risk of being Captain Obvious, we're not expecting a lot of flooding this year. But again, having said that, we did want to just share part of our annual due diligence, what the kind of information that we get from the National Weather Service. What they've given us right now is we've got less than a 50% chance of even hitting flood stage in Grand Forks. So again, they dial in the climatic and existing conditions and getting to that point, and that's what we rely on in our planning. But having said that, even on a light year like this, city staff does go through their due diligence. Public Works will be out there checking the pump stations and the outfall lines and things like that. Engineering went out and did our normal bid quotes for various flood fighting activities. What that does is allows us to be able to respond if something does happen. We can get things moving within about a 48-hour process on the contractor side. So we've done that. Again, it's kind of a course of action for us, and again, due diligence. The only thing we're not asking for this year that we normally would, we're not asking to actually award these contracts because we can save a little bit of time and effort in going through an actual award process. So the fact we've done the bidding and things like that, we can respond to that in real short order. So with that, that's the quick update, and stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Grasser?
Okay.
Very good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Item 2.2, project update for project number 8805, the Valley Middle School Transportation Study. Mr. Karyanka, before you begin, I do have a family member who works for Bolton Mank, the consulting firm. And so I would ask that the council consider recusing me from this vote.
It is information only.
It's information only. We'll just move forward with them. Thanks.
Fair enough.
Thanks, Mr. Weigel. Yeah.
Thank you, Vice President Weber. This transportation study was originally initiated by the city to identify some of the potential shifts of the traffic patterns associated with the redevelopment and identify improvements that could be made either as part of the redevelopment of this site or as part of a future city project in the area. The study initially started looking at the existing conditions of the area, the existing layout of the school, traffic patterns, both vehicular as well as pedestrians, reviewing past crash data, as well as looking at the proposed site plan layout, which you can kind of see here. One of the things that I do want to point out is that in their proposed plan, the school district is looking at nearly doubling the size of their existing parking lot, as well as nearly doubling the length of their existing pickup and drop-off area. Those are a couple of key points, especially in looking at traffic modeling and everything else. Our consultant did end up using the data they collected last November to develop a traffic model to kind of look at these areas, see if we're going to have any traffic issues. And one of the things that they noted is that because of that extended length of that pickup and drop-off, during normal situations, we shouldn't see any significant impacts to the public roadway system. Now, this study also is proposing a number of recommendations, as you can see on the screen, and these recommendations may also have impacts to the surrounding neighborhoods. So as part of this, staff feels it's important to share these recommendations with the neighborhood and also get their input on that prior to implementing these or deciding whether or not to implement these. Some of the major items on here include pretty much adding in some no parking along the northbound side of North 21st Street, North 22nd Street, and North 23rd Street from 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. That way then residents can still park. Right now, parking is allowed on both sides of the road in these areas. And so as people are kind of moving through, circulating to pick up, drop off students, etc., we want to make sure that they're able to traverse that easily enough. The next item is relocating the existing flashing beacon that's located at University and 21st, which right now is directly south of the main entrance to Valley Middle School, shifting that over to University and 23rd. That way then students either walking to or walking from school, they can end up walking along the west side of 23rd there, which you can also see there's a proposed shared use path that's recommended in there as well. That way then they can avoid driveways, avoid crossing streets, avoid those vehicular pedestrian conflicts. Next item is just extending the no parking along Fifth Avenue North, along the north side. That's kind of in front of the school. Right now it's kind of in front of I think it's a football field, baseball field area. But since the school's going to be located in that area, it makes sense to extend that no parking. And then lastly is the addition of, or recommendation for the bike lanes along North 20th Street and University Avenue. These were recommendations that were identified in the MPO Bike Ped Plan. We did have some public input during that process, and there was some pushback on that from residents, especially on University Avenue. So that's one I think that's probably also going to be a little bit more controversial as well. So with all of this, we're currently working on an engineering amendment with the consultant to get some public input, get some additional technical details, some other pieces that we're kind of looking at in there, as well as giving a presentation to the committee of the whole and potentially city council in the future. With that, this is just a information only item. Just wanted to give everybody a heads up that we're looking to bring this forward for a public input meeting. And with that, I can stand for any questions you may have.
Very good, thanks. Any questions for Mr. Kirienko? Yes, Ms. Linsky.
Has Grand Forks ever had a snow emergency, you know, where you can't park on the north side 12 hours after it snows, or?
That I don't know off the top of my head. I think that would be something more public works related, I'm assuming. Because they
Mr.
end up handling.
Sandy's shaking his head yes.
Okay.
I'm just curious because I know in the valley, like on the side streets when you pick up kids, the snow gets so, you know how the curbs kind of push out the longer winter goes, and it's almost impossible to get through some of those streets. I just think a snow emergency would help some of that. I know around other schools too. I'm just curious. I know it's not your department. Why we don't have a snow emergency? But
Unfortunately, I don't have a solid answer for that one. Mr. Grasser might be able to answer that one with a little bit.
Thank you. I'm not sure I have a solid answer either. I know we do have snow emergency routes, and that's one of the things we might want to be thinking about is, you know, do we include some of these areas around the school, not just snow emergency for initial cleaning, but maybe for some additional cleaning, because that's one of the problems with parking is you're right, they tend to encroach over the winter because there's cars there a lot, and it's very difficult usually to get back to the curb.
And then my second question is, it says, you know, to add or restripe the crosswalk. Do we not paint the crosswalk every year in school zones?
I believe our Public Works Department, our Streets Department does. They may stripe it either once or possibly even twice a year. Yeah, once in the spring, once it gets warm enough, and then once in the fall, as just before school is getting into session. And I know in the last couple of years, paint has been difficult to come by. So the past couple of years, I don't think is necessarily representative of what they typically do.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? Yes, Mr. Weigel, please.
Mr. Karanko, have they talked at all about, I went to Valley a long time ago, and you're right, on Fifth Avenue North, the road does get really congested, east-west traffic. Same with north-south on 20th. Obviously, shifting the school over maybe should avoid some of that, and adding parking and then the loop. But have we ever thought about either widening that street a little bit to the north? Or even putting some type of loading drop-off zone that isn't necessarily the loop, but could maybe push a little bit farther north?
Councilmember Weigel, as far as I'm aware, we haven't really looked at reconstructing Fifth Avenue North. I'm sure if we did end up looking at something like that in the future, that's something we could potentially look at. Hopefully with what we're seeing in the traffic models, hopefully the addition of the parking and that loop are going to end up helping us out a significant amount. So that's something we'll have to just continue to keep an eye on and monitor. And when the time does come to reconstruct Fifth, that's something we could certainly look at.
Sounds good, thank you.
Mr. Veen, please.
I would assume with all the work that they've done here, they did do traffic studies on here, looking at traffic flows in and out. And they've identified some of those points that they've recommended improvements on, right? So, because I've not seen this comprehensive of plan done around a school for maybe ever. It's really well done. And it's nice to see that they've looked at so many different opportunities for improvement.
Sounds like you have a green light. Yes. Anything further for Mr. Kuryanka at this point? Yes. Mrs. Sosky? Oh, President Sandy, please.
Ms. Osowski certainly is welcome to go ahead of me.
I think she was just letting me know that you wanted to say something. Thanks.
Certainly. So, Mr. Kriko, as a member of the NPO, you spend a lot of time talking about bike paths and the transportation system. If the folks along University are concerned about adding bike paths, and we're talking about adding bike paths to North 20th, and I understand that we spend a lot of time and a lot of money doing studies on transportation and bike paths. Sir, any reason why, knowing that we're going to be putting a lot of young people, or there are already a lot of young people that are biking in the area, can we push the bike paths to the sidewalks in those areas, and just instead of, I recognize that it's expensive to pull out sidewalk and build, the bike paths, but it's so much safer to get the kids off the streets and put them on the sidewalk, make it a bike path, move the sidewalks into bike paths.
We seem to have lost your audio there, President Sandy.
So I think that would alleviate some of the concerns of the neighbors, and it has to be safer for the kids riding their bikes.
President Sandy, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think shared use paths are the way to go. It's a facility that's definitely meant for all ages and abilities versus a bike lane, which tends to lead to more being used by people who are more confident riding with vehicles. One of the concerns I remember hearing from when we had the public input meeting as part of that MPO bike and ped plan was with a bike lane on University, you will likely need to remove parking at least on one side. With a bike path, with a 10-foot wide bike path, you would likely end up impacting the mature trees. Now, that was another thing that the residents along the corridor, they like the mature trees that they have, so they don't want to lose those. One of the things we might be able to look at is maybe a narrower shared use path, maybe around 8 feet wide, and that may be able to get through without impacting the trees. So that's something we can continue to look at as we continue moving forward. I believe we have a project coming up on University between 25th and Columbia, in which we're looking at a shared use path on the south side to kind of start that corridor moving to the east.
Thank you, Mr. Kriko. I certainly believe that it would be better to be less government and more flexible, but I know that on the bike paths or the shared use paths, we have to follow federal regs, so I get it, but it certainly would be great if we could try to figure out how to be flexible in that. One other question is all the north-south roads, the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, what parking is currently allowed on the east side of the road?
Right now, along 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, I believe parking is allowed on both sides of the road.
So, knowing that many of those homes in there are also rentals for the university, and we already have a hard time with congestion for parking related to the rentals, and certainly the owner-occupied homes have families with kids and multiple cars. Changing to no parking on the east sides during the day is going to be a significant burden, which is why I really appreciate that our engineering department is out ahead of this, wanting to notify the public. So I think you guys are doing a really good job on this, making sure that we're doing the traffic studies as necessary and making sure that we're having the public input meetings we need. So I really appreciate it, and I'll certainly look forward to hearing more about how it goes.
Thank you.
Mr. Veen, please.
Well, I think Ms. Sandy brought up some good information that needs to be considered. The one thing that's interesting about this area is they got an alley, and people can park off the alley in their backyards versus having to park in the front on the full length. So that would be something that it'd be interesting to get feedback from the people on too.
And if I may add to that as well, the majority of the homes in this area actually front onto the avenues, and so people are going to be more likely to park on the avenues rather than on the streets.
Unless there's anything further, we'll move on to discussion items. Item 3.1, approve ballot language, required measure for printing of minutes and checks. Ms. Storstad, please.
Yes, thank you. Members of the committee, this is a pretty routine item. We need to put some ballot language on this upcoming June 11th election. This goes back to November of '94 when there was initiated measure requiring cities to put a ballot, to the ballot, a question of whether the minutes of our governing body shall be published in the official newspaper. Official newspaper is, of course, the Grand Forks Herald. And then ever since 1996 and going forward, every 4 years, we are required to put this on the ballot. We do have attached suggested ballot language that's been attached to your staff report. We need to give ballot language to the county no later than April 1st. This ballot language that's before you is similar, or it is the same identical language as we've had in the past. With that, I'd be open to any questions.
Very good, thank you. Any questions or a motion? We have a motion from Ms.
I'll
Osowski.
second with a question.
Second from Mr. Weigel, go
Ms.
ahead.
Dorset, purely out of curiosity, how much do we spend each year?
You know, I would say estimate but somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 a year.
Thank you.
And if I did look back to the last time this went to a vote, it was a 60% yes.
Further questions or comments? Otherwise, we have a motion on the floor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item 3.2, the 2023 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, the CAPER. Mr. Hanson, please.
Vice President Weber, members of the committee, before you is the request from staff to hold a public hearing on the 2023 CAPER. The CAPER is a report based on our 5-year strategic consolidated plan with housing and urban development for the use of our community development block grant funds. We submit this every year and just asking to hold a public hearing to accept public comment on our performance over the last year.
Motion from Mr. Weigel, second from Ms. Osowski. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Henson. Item 3.3, the Budget Amendment, Fire Department, Fiscal Year 23 State Homeland Security Grant, I'm guessing, from the Grand Forks Fire Department. Chief Lorenz, please.
Good evening, members of the council. This is a grant we get annually. The Grand Forks Fire Department, under the City of Grand Forks, we have a contract with the Department of Emergency Service to provide regional response for hazardous materials incidents and structural collapse incidents in the northeast region of North Dakota. And this grant funding starts at the federal level, and it's filtered down through the state, and ultimately they allocate it to us. This dollar amount has been consistent the last couple of years, and this is funding we use to support that regional response program that we have. So there is no match. This is take the money, and so we're just requesting to accept this grant amount and any necessary budget amendments.
I move approval.
We have a motion from Ms. Osowski, second from Ms. Lunsky. Further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Chief Lorenz.
Thank you.
Item 3.4, Cost Participation Construction and Maintenance Agreement, Plans and Specifications for Project Number 8465, Regional Traffic Signal Rehabilitation. Mr. Koryanko.
Thank you, Vice President Weber. What you have before you is a cost participation and maintenance agreement and plans and specs for the regional traffic signal project. This project is anticipated to have its bid opening on April 12th. Overall, this is estimated to be about a $6.6 million project. City share on this is anticipated to be about $283,000. This, with being a regional project, it's looking at replacing a total of 7 signals and rehabbing another 5 signal locations. With the long lead times associated with replacement signals, you're looking at somewhere between 6 to 9 months. We're looking at rehabbing the signals along Demers Avenue this year, and then reconstructing or replacing the signals up on Gateway Drive and the 2 along Washington in 2025. With that, can stand for any questions you may have.
Move approval.
We have a motion from Ms. Osowski, second from Ms. Linsky. Questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Linsky, please.
So just real quick, when you say rehab, you just take them down, find any holes you fix and you repaint them?
Councilmember Lunsky, the rehab typically consists of taking the pole down, sandblasting it, painting it. That way then you can try to reduce or minimize the amount of corrosion taking place, as well as, depending on the severity of and how old, replacing controllers, cabinets, hardware, conduit and cable, signal heads as needed, that sort of thing.
And the ones that need to be replaced obviously can't be rehabbed?
A lot of those signals are rather old. I want to say that somewhere between 25 and 50 plus years old. Typically, a signal has about a life expectancy of about 30 years. So a number of our signals are well past that. Could use replacement.
Further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Karyanko. Item 3.5, bid award for project number 8752-53, the 2024 sidewalks and ADA curb ramps. Mr. Lieberman.
Thank you, Vice President Weber. Good evening, members of the committee. This is our annual project to add sidewalks to new developments and also replace unsafe sidewalks. Also upgrade some of our curb ramps, so making sure they're compliant with Americans with Disabilities Act. We received bids this past Thursday. 2 bids were received, and the low bid was submitted by Tony Anderson Construction. It was about 18% under the engineer's estimate, so we're very pleased with that. So tonight we are recommending award to the low bidder, Tony Anderson Construction, in the amount of $306,425. We're also requesting to approve a budget amendment, as his base bid was slightly over the budget amount for the ADA project.
Very good, thanks.
Move approval.
Motion from Mr. Veen, second from Ms. Osowski. Further questions or comments? President Sanders.
Good question. So at what point would we rebid when they're over the engineer's estimate, Mr. Lieberman?
There are some Century Code requirements. If it was significantly above the engineer's estimate. In this case, the city budgets $50,000 annually for this requirement. I believe his base bid was about $54,000 for that. But the reality is, if our requirements come in and we have a request for to accommodate, say, a resident that has a disability and requests focus, and that puts us over budget, we're typically drawing funds from Fund 4815. So usually funding this requirement is not a concern. Our main concern is accommodating the ADA request.
I know that Mr. Anderson gets this contract award virtually every year, and he knows what we're budgeting, so I'm surprised that he's over budget. Perhaps that's a rhetorical question. I'm ready to vote. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
So motion passes 6-1 with President Sandy dissenting. Item 3.6, bid award for project number 8788, district number 780, reconstruct Walnut Street from South 5th to First Avenue South. Mr. Lieberman.
Thank you once again. This project is our proposed project to reconstruct Walnut Street. It's about a block around the Central Police Department. We received bids last week, Thursday. We opened 4 bids. The low bid was submitted by Op Construction. It was about 12% under the engineer's estimate, so we're very pleased with that as well. This project is eligible for an 80-20 city cost share of 80%, so the city portion of that is estimated to be $345,000. We had programmed or budgeted $306,000 roughly, so we're requesting a budget amendment along with this. So staff recommendation is to award to the low bidder, Op Construction, in the amount of $430,861.40, and approve a necessary budget amendment.
Very good.
I move
Thanks.
approval.
We have a motion from Ms. Osowski, second from Mr. Weigel. Further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank
you, Mr. Lieberman. Item 3.7, bid award for project number 8828 Riverside Southwest Discharge Pond Silt Removal. Mr. Danielson.
Thank you, President or Vice President Weber, members of the committee. This project is a pond cleaning project. It is the Riverside Pond, which is up by Riverside Park. It's a wet side pond, so it's on the wet side of our flood protection system. Because it's on the wet side, it tends to fill up with silt more frequently. When the river comes up and goes down, it deposits that silt more often than you would see on a pond in the dry side. So this project is meant to go in, clean it out, make it so that our maintenance staff can get in there and do their activities during flood season a little bit easier. We opened bids for this project last Thursday. We opened 9 bids for this project, and the low bid was from Gowan Construction at about $72,500, which was 56% underneath our engineer's estimate. So great news there. Funding for this project is to come out of the Flood Protection Capital Maintenance Fund 4154, where we had $80,000 budgeted. So we're just looking to award this project to the low bidder, Gowan.
Motion from Mr. Weigel, second from Ms. Osowski. Further questions, comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Item 3.8, plans and specs for project number 8791, the 2024 flood outfall repairs. Mr. Danielson.
Thank you, Vice President Weber, members of the committee. So this project is a pipe repair project that's centered around our flood protection system pipe outfalls. And there's 2 locations that we're looking to do some repairs at under this project. The first one is at Flood Station 210. It's one of our pump stations for the flood protection system. It's down at the Sunbeam Trail access, if you're familiar with the area, Terrace Drive and Belmont Road, right in that area. The flood station has a discharge pipe that runs out to the river, and at the river, that pipe has started to settle. We're thinking some of the material is washed out from underneath it, so the pipe is settling, and those joints are starting to come apart, allowing material to fall into the pipe. And you can even see, if you're in the pipe, you can see straight up to daylight in some areas, so we got to get in there and fix that. So what we're planning to do is go in, pull all that pipe out. We're going to put in an improved base underneath that pipe to try and stop it from happening in the future. And then we'll take the existing pipe, put it back in, and then fill it back up. So that's how we're planning to tackle that one. The other location is fairly similar. It's up at North Washington and the English Coulee Diversion, way on the north end of town. We've got a gate structure that controls water flow coming from the south to go into the English Coulee Diversion. We've got some settlement happening in that location as well. The only difference is that this one is in the levee. So the techniques that we'll use to get in there and make some improvements are a little bit different than what we would do in the other location, but ultimately the goal is the same. Go in, take the pipe out, reconfigure some things on the inside there, put the pipe back, and then we'll restore the levee to its original design as well. These projects are pretty similar in nature, so we're going to bid them as one contract, even though they are geographically quite distanced. The total project with both of them combined, we're estimating at about $750,000, with the majority of that going to the Flood Station 210 project. That pipe is really large. It's 9-foot diameter pipe, and the access to that location is a little bit difficult. So about $565,000 of that estimate goes towards the Flood Station 210, with the remaining going towards the one up at Washington and the English Coulee Diversion. So we've got this project coming out of the same fund, 4154, Flood Protection Capital Maintenance. We're expecting that we don't have enough in this line item to cover these projects, so we're likely going to be back asking for a budget amendment at the time of bid. But for now, we're just looking for approval of the plans and specs and then direction for us to advertise these for construction.
Motion from Ms. Osowski, second from Ms. Lunsky. Questions or comments? Mr. Veen, please.
Yeah, on that larger pipe, is that our concrete pipe?
Yes, RCP.
Anything else? Hearing nothing else, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item 3.9, plans and specs for project number 8815, 2024 flood infrastructure rehab. Mr. Danielson.
Thank you, Vice President Weber, members of the committee. So this one is another flood rehab project. This is kind of our miscellaneous project for this year to tackle some items that are related to the flood protection system. The first major component of this project is going to be some pavement repairs adjacent to grate structures by our flood protection system. So we've got the pump stations along the flood protection system, and most of those have a gate well structure that has a grate at the top of it where water on adjacent pavement will drain. Well, at a lot of these locations, that structure is staying pretty rigid where it's at, but the pavement around it is settling out. So you've got, some drastic lips and some poor drainage around a lot of these structures. So we've got 2 locations that we're going to go in and we're going to take the pavement out, put the pavement back in, and hopefully tie it all back together nice and smooth to get away from some of the problems that we're seeing. The first location where that's happening is right back here by the Pump Station 204, just north of Demers Avenue, back behind the Ember Coffee House, if you're familiar with it, or the Current. If you've been back there, you've probably seen that a lot of water pools around that graded structure back there. So that'll be the first location that we're tackling that, and then the second one will be at the Lincoln Park entrance. There's a driveway just to the west, northwest of that entrance that has 2 large grate structures that are supposed to drain the adjacent pavement there. That the pavement's settled out, so we're going to go in there and do the same thing, take the pavement out and fix that issue there. So that's the first half of this project, and the second half is flood wall crack sealing. Last summer, we had Houston Engineering perform an inspection of our flood wall system. So they went through and they identified all the locations on our flood wall that had varying levels of cracking or just minor deficiencies on it, and if they found the major deficiencies. But we found that we were in pretty good shape. But this contract is going to go through their report and take all of the cracks that they identified, and we're going to go through and crack seal all of them up so that we can keep our flood wall in operating condition. It's likely that those cracks, as they sit today, wouldn't be considered unacceptable by the Corps if they were to come do a graded inspection, but they could very easily get to a point where they would be unacceptable, so we just want to get ahead of those and tackle them with this project. There's also a couple other just miscellaneous things, some topsoil backfill where there's some settlement along the flood wall, but the majority of this contract will be that pavement repair and the crack sealing. So we're estimating this project to cost about $125,000, with, again, coming from the 4154 flood protection capital maintenance, where we've got $500,000 budgeted. And right now, we're looking for approval of plans and specifications, then direction to bid the project.
We have a motion from Ms. Osowski. A second from Mr. Vian. Question, Mr.
Yeah.
Vian?
I guess, for me, it's reassuring that you're doing this work, especially this year when we don't expect a lot of water, to keep them, up to the highest level standard that we can. So even if they're small, it's nice to see the work done, and this is probably the ideal time to do it. Thank you.
Agreed.
I was thinking something similar. These, I don't mean to make light of these issues, but it's nice to have such problems and to have such a proactive approach to it. Yes. Ms. Linsky, please.
Will this also fix any cracks in the earthen dike?
So this project is intended to focus mostly on the flood wall. As part of the inspection that Houston Engineering did, they inspected the levee adjacent to the flood wall, but they didn't actually go and inspect the levee. So while there are some issues out there with the levee itself, the report that we had was focused on the flood wall, but we are aware of those issues and we're intending to come back to those as well. But right now, it's just the flood wall itself.
Thank you.
Anything further? Hearing nothing, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. And Mr. Lieberman, take it on home with item 310 and 311. Item 310, plans and specs for project number 8790, district number 782, reconstruct 10th Avenue South from South 48th Street to 350 feet west of South 50th Street. Mr. Lieberman, please.
Thank you, Vice President Weber. This project proposes to reconstruct 10th Avenue South in the industrial park from South 48th Street west to essentially where the street dead ends at the Lineage Logistics property line. This previously met before the City Council, where Council created the Special Assessment District and approved the engineer's report. Later, we expanded the assessment district. So engineering department's been working on the plans and specifications, and we feel it's ready to advertise for bid. Our estimate for construction cost is about $1.47 million with the 80/20 city cost share of 80%. That's estimated to be $1.18 million. We have a $1.0 million budget in 2024 for this project, so it's a little bit over budget, but not pretty close. So with that, we are requesting approval of the plans and specifications tonight and direction to advertise for bids.
Questions or comments? Have a motion from Mr. Veen, second from Ms. Lunsky. Question, Mr. President Sandy, please.
Yeah, quick comment. Mr. Lieberman, I don't know, I know you got the dream team there with Krenko and Grasser. The plans and specs, I know this probably isn't a fair question for you. And so I'm, perhaps if you can get this, Mr. Grasser to jump in, but we go through plans and specs and at all these meetings, and I think it's great. You guys do a great job of providing a clear understanding of what we're bidding out, but I wonder why we don't lump all the plans and specs into one item and read it in and then just walk through all of them, because you guys are the experts that are explaining to us what you're going to do and why you're going to do it and what the estimates are and what we think it's going to cost. Here I am 13 years in, or 14 years, almost 14, and I still continue to wonder why we go through this exercise of walking through these plans and specs, because I've never once seen any time where the city council said we don't want you to move forward with plans and specs, knowing that we don't have to award any project we don't want. Scratch your thoughts on that? Why are we doing this?
Well, there's two different reasons, a couple different reasons. The North Dakota Century Code identifies plans and specs as part of the special assessment process. You've got very specific benchmarks that you need to hit. And again, with special assessments, you want to be very, make sure you catch all of those steps, that you stay in the legal process. So the plans and specs are part of that. A lot of the other ones, plans and specs are part of a couple of different things. One is for us to notify you that we're doing something, right? If some of these things like the outfall repairs and stuff, we don't necessarily want to surprise you by bringing in a bid for a project that you had no idea was going on. So the plans and specs serve as kind of a public notice and a city council notice that, what's going on, why we're doing it, that kind of thing, instead of bringing it in at the bid time. The other one, quite frankly, gets to be, in my opinion, I want to make sure that we have, council's stamp on moving those things forward in case there are, again, any liability or legal questions that come to pass. So it's a procedural thing. And if there aren't a lot of questions, it usually happens pretty quick.
And it is, and I think, I don't mean to speak for everyone else, but I really appreciate that you guys do such a good and thorough job of explaining things that for some people are exciting and for others are pretty mundane. Thank you very much, Mr. Grasser.
There you go.
Mr. Weigel, please.
Mr. Lieberman, when are we looking at reconstructing South 48th Street? I think we've talked about that in the past, but I just don't recall an approximate time, because I know that road's pretty beat up and rough as well.
It is. Over the past 3 years, I think we've gone out there twice and with city funding and replaced panels to keep it functional for the heavy traffic. The actual year, I forget, 2026 or 27, but one of the challenges we have is just seeing where it fits in our capital improvement plan and possibility of, a federal cost share on that street. We're hoping that works out at some point in the future, but we intend to fully keep it functional through panel replacement until we can get the either city or federal funding to make that replacement happen.
Thank you.
Anything further? Yes, Mr. Grasser, please.
Can I chase that just a little bit? Because it is a big challenge. That road out there is a little bit windy in places, and it's really not wide enough. You see lots of places where the trucks get off on the edges, and we attempt to try to do some of that with gravel and aggregate and things like that. But to go through a rebuilding process, we would, probably like to lower the road a little bit, and we would like to widen the road a little bit. The constraints there is that we have fairly narrow right-of-way, and you've got fairly shallow ditches. And the other problem we have is there's not near enough storm sewer out there to cover, the ditches convey water and they also store water a little bit. So if you get rid of them, now you've got a lot more water to deal with. You drive your stormwater costs up because now you got to put them into pipes and transport it, right? Then you got to put it into a stormwater pond. And so just as a heads up, that's part of what we've been dealing with here for a couple of years, and we're trying to find that right balance between being able to get that road, well functional and not drive up the stormwater costs. We've had lots of examples here where we've had to, in existing developments, try to deal with the stormwater issue, and it is hard and it is expensive. So that's part of what we're dealing with out there, and we are planning on, to help alleviate some of the costs, we are trying to bring some federal dollars into that thing to help, offset some of the costs.
Mr. Weber, if I could.
Please, of course.
And that's the reason I ask, is because we're going to tear out a huge chunk of this road this year for the tune of $1 million, knowing that we have, I haven't been on 10th in quite a while, but I know South 48th, I'd guess it's just as bad, if not worse, than 10th Avenue. And so I know as we've sold more of those industrial park plots, they completely redid the road going south, farther south from, 17th or so. That's all a brand new roadway. I'm wondering, was that paid for by, was that through the growth fund or the, if anybody has any idea?
Most of that, a large chunk of that was paid for with federal dollars. We had North Dakota DOT dollars. There was some that was special assessed. I think not so much on the roadway, but the storm sewer component had a special assessment piece to it. On the federal funding side, we just don't have enough money to get some of these streets. It's been really a tough trade-off because the competing interest on doing the work in the industrial park is really North Columbia Road, on the federal side. And now that we're focusing on, the 42nd grade separated crossing and the 47th interchange, there's a lot of competing. So I don't want people to have the idea that there's a large amount of federal dollars out there that we can kind of just easily shuffle around and bring into this system. So it's a tough balancing act. We try to talk about that during the budget process and the 6-year CIP.
Thank you.
Mr. Weber?
Yes, President Sandy, please.
Yeah, I think to Mr. Grasser's point, and that's something that Mr. Grasser has already mentioned it, at least on a couple occasions, but I think it's important for people to recognize when he's talking about these competing projects are competing for all of our dollars, the federal dollars, the state dollars, and all the local property tax dollars that we bring in for roads. And sales tax dollars that we bring in for roads that we're currently using, and it's been great the last few years. We've been flush with cash, and we've been doing lots of road construction projects, but we've also picked up an additional share of the local match that would normally be special assessed. And at some point, we're going to run out of money when we're talking about these major projects with the grade separation at 42nd and Demers and the interchange. And so people need to understand that, like when we talk about North 10th Street, when they protested that out, they were getting the best deal the city of Grand Forks has ever provided, and they didn't like the fact of how much we were going to ask them to pay. And it's not going to be that long from now when the percentages are probably going to have to change, and instead of picking up 80%, we're going to have to go back to some smaller percentage and special assess more. So I just think it's important that, and again, I think Mr. Grasser has done a good job without sounding like an alarmist. He's done a good job of bringing this up. Perhaps I'm going to sound a little more alarmist because people really need to know. They need to recognize what's going on. We only have so many dollars. Thank you, Mr. Weber.
Thank you, President Sandy. A bit technical, but a really great discussion about some important matters in our community. There's a motion on the floor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item 311, create district for project number 8811, district number 604, Second Avenue North, the storm sewer on Columbia Road from Columbia Road to North 25th Street. Mr. Lieberman, please.
Thank you, Vice President Weber. This project is one of several city projects to support the redevelopment of the University of North Dakota East Campus. We've been working with UND Facilities and with the developer of the Memorial Village facilities. You may recall last fall, council approved and engineering constructed new sanitary sewer for along Second Avenue. This is the parallel project of storm sewer for that same development. The existing street has a 12-inch storm sewer underneath it, constructed in 1950. It's older pipe, but it's definitely undersized is the issue for the amount of impervious surface area that we currently have with this new development. So we're proposing to upsize that to 30, 36, and 42-inch trunk main along Second Avenue. This is proposed to be 100% special assessed to the adjacent properties that will benefit from this. So there's no city cost directly to this. In the staff report, there is a map showing the proposed district boundaries for this special assessment district, which includes those properties. It is worth noting that UND has a very large property south of Second Avenue that's depicted on that map. We will be looking at the actual drainage area that drains into that proposed storm sewer pipe, and we'll be recommending a benefit to the Special Assessment Commission based on that, not based on the entire property that you see there. But it's the city policy to include the entire property in a district boundary. So that's more for a point of clarification. This project is unfortunately right down the middle of Second Avenue, so we will be proposing to construct it this year and replace it with an asphalt patch, which will be designed to last 2 years until we reconstruct Second Avenue pavements in 2026. So with that, this evening, staff is recommending approval of the engineer's report, creation of the special assessment district, and directing engineering to prepare plans and specifications for this project.
Question?
Yes, President Sandy, please. Thanks.
Mr. Lieberman, what is the zoning on all of this land? I'm sorry, I know that there are several residential homes, but what about the rest of it?
Oh, that is a great question, President Sandy. I don't recall off the top of my head, but
Is it university zoning? Is that state-controlled zoning? And the reason I'm asking is because the state of North Dakota has done a tremendous job of not doing a good job with their storm sewers. And so I'm wondering, and I see how big you're making that area.
Yeah.
Are we picking up a whole bunch of problems that used to be there? And if so, that's great. But we're fixing it. But if so, are we unnecessarily special assessing some residents when we're fixing a state of North Dakota problem?
President Sandy, I believe the map captures the properties that immediately front this proposed development. As you look to the north, the district boundary goes all the way up to University Avenue. Part of that property previously drained into University Avenue. It was not treated for stormwater quality considerations, and we have a responsibility under the MS4 permit to treat that for water quality as well. So that district is being captured and will be drained into this proposed storm sewer. And like I mentioned before, the area south of Second Avenue, it's a very large property you see there, but that entire property does not necessarily reflect the percent benefit for that pipe. So engineering will recommend a drainage area, which will be likely a smaller section of that property that will actually drain into that pipe. And we'll recommend a benefit based on that.
Thank you, Mr. Lieberman. Appreciate that very clear explanation.
Further questions or comments on this? Mr. Vian, please.
Mr. Lieberman, mean, this area has always been undersized with storm sewer, so it's great that you're increasing in the size and capacity. It's still got to run somewhere. So it's running north into the main that goes through University Park then?
So, Councilmember Ravine, this project will drain into a new private stormwater pond that UND and the developer will be constructing just east of the Pollard Center. That pond will drain to a new sanitary main or storm main that will drain down to University Avenue and west to the English Coulee. It will not drain through University Park like this area currently does.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Lieberman, I think you've already said this, and I've gotten other information, but just to confirm one more time, there are no residential properties in this zone, right?
Correct.
Very good. Further questions or comments? Hearing none, I'm looking for a motion. Motion from Mr. Weigel, second from Mrs. Susky. Questions or comments about the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously, which brings us to... Thank you, Mr. Lieberman. Item 4, City Council member discussion matters. Does anyone have anything this evening? Yes, Ms. Lunsky, please.
I just wanted to bring up snow emergency one more time while we have the time to talk about it. And maybe I'm not saying it the right thing, but I know even downtown, throughout the winter, the cars get pushed out where the back of some of the larger pickup trucks was actually at the midline. They're pushed out so far. And I think a snow emergency, if you couldn't park on the north side for the first day after the snow, or I think it could alleviate a lot of those problems. And I know a lot of the side streets, even on the near south side, near north side, they also get really congested. And I was just curious, I know Sharon's not here, but if we could continue talking about some of those options for next winter. Obviously, we had a very light winter, but... and I didn't know if Mr. Sandy knew when we got rid of snow emergencies.
So, thank you, Ms. Lansky. Good comments, and I'd like to point out that the mayor can call for no parking on the streets so that we can plow the snow, and he did last year. In specific areas, in last year specifically downtown, and I can't remember if it was this last fall or last spring, but the mayor can make that designation as he sees fit. He has used it, and I think you're right. We should continue to encourage that. I think the problem is a lot of those areas where you end up with the biggest parking problems, there are lots of rentals or congested parking, which is because of the congested parking is why you end up with the problems with the cars being pushed up because people are parking everywhere. And so I think in general, whether it's Mayor Baczynski or Mayor Brown or previous mayors, they don't like to do it all that often because it's a big, it's difficult for the people that live in those areas. And certainly Mr. Veen probably knows this better than I do, and perhaps he could talk to it as well. Thank you.
Mr. Veen or Mr. Brooks, I know you were involved in a lot of those discussions as well. Either of you have anything to add? Mr. Veen?
I actually don't.
No.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
I would just
Mr.
add that
Weigel.
the city police department partners with Public Works all the time and aren't afraid to tow cars on street cleaning days, whether it's downtown, whether it's in the university corridor, or wherever it is. They'll actually pick up, move your car, and charge you for both of those things on street cleaning nights or days. So I think that maybe Chief Nelson can speak to that. That's pretty routine to help clear a lot of that snow without the actual emergency
Right,
being issued.
and I'd agree with Mr. Weigel, and I think actually, kind of what you're asking for, I know you've seen in East Grand Forks, these are designated snow routes. That's going to actually take an ordinance change that would allow for us to proactively tell people that you can't park there for 24 hours afterwards. And in essence, now what happens is we work with Public Works. They'll look and say, okay, we're going to clean downtown this evening. We'll get 2 officers there. As they hook a car up, we're writing a ticket for the tow, we're writing a ticket for the relocate and for the parking. And then we consistently would leapfrog to get those areas of town cleaned. And I know what you're saying, but if you look at a lot of the cities that have these
emergency routes. It's not usually for your side streets, and I'll probably misspeak, but it's for the main roads. I don't want to say arterial or feeder. I'm not an engineer, but I think for the most part, when we get involved is kind of post. We see the same thing, and that's where the vehicles and stuff are sticking out, but it's usually within 24 to 48 hours, we're taking care of that, and it's usually in the middle of the night. So that's kind of one of those tasks that comes with it without actually truthfully saying it's a designated snow emergency. Then after a major snow, you can't park here for the first 24 hours. I've seen that in other cities. We do not have that per se written and codified, but what we're doing right now is just taking it event by event.
I think if we had a ordinance, it would be easier for everyone to understand than just event by event, or,
Yeah, and you may get there, but I don't know that you're going to end up with a lot different result, because usually within that first 24 hours, we're pulling cars out of there, or if somebody parks their car at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and all of a sudden you get a blizzard overnight, are they really violating that snow emergency route, or we're just pulling them because we need to clear the roadway anyway? So I think it could go back and forth. It doesn't matter to us if there's an ordinance to work with. We'll obviously work with it, but for right now, we still are addressing it, but probably just unnoticed.
thank you. I have one more thing.
Please.
Not for Chief Nelson. Our utility bills, I spent some time yesterday trying to not get the utility bill, and it's very difficult to unsubscribe to the mail copy. And I'm sure we spend quite a bit on postage every month.
I can address that. So we have had some challenges with our software the last few months. And I know I, for one, went on myself to try to uncheck the box. It's a known issue. We're trying to work through it. There's minimal amount that get mailed out that want it emailed, so it's not it's not a big expense. But we are trying to rectify that with the software company.
Thank you.
Apologize for that.
That's all.
Great comments. Thanks. Anything further from anyone?
Move we adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn, second from Ms. Osowski. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Boom. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.